Welcome to Ask Leo Answercast number 142. From the travel trailer behind the barn next to the pasture behind the house in Woodinville, Washington, I'm Leo Notenboom, and I'm here to answer questions that people have been asking out at AskLeo.com. Yep, I do sometimes record the Answercast out here in my travel trailer simply because it's actually not that bad a recording studio. And, when the dogs get a little too barky in the house, it's just a safer and quieter place to be. I kind of figure you guys don't want to hear my dogs barking in the background. Today's Answercast is brought to you by the Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance. Keep your computer running better and longer. That's what the Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance is all about. Culled from the answers on Ask Leo, it'll help you speed up your computer, free up space, and avoid spending money that you just don't need to spend by making that machine last as long as possible. The Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance can be purchased in either of three formats: a downloadable PDF, or as a Kindle book, or as a paperback from Amazon. Regardless of which one you choose, once you register the book using the link inside the book, you'll be able to download the digital version of the book in any of PDF, Mobi, or EPUB formats, or all three if you so desire. Also, once you register the book, you'll get access to companion videos that demonstrate the various steps that are outlined in the book. I see people discarding computers way too early. And it just doesn't have to be that way, especially when the problem that they're trying to deal with is all about the software, not the hardware. The Ask Leo Guide to Routine Maintenance can help. Visit askleo.com/guide to learn more and purchase your copy today. Leo, I'm using a shareware backup utility called AISL Backup, which seems similar to Macrium Reflect that you recommend. Here's the question. I made a disk image backup and then every day add an incremental backup. I've been doing this for about a year and so now have 300 plus files in the backup. Can I keep doing this or is it bad practice? I noticed that somewhere you recommended a full image backup once a week and an incrementals in between. Nope, it's not practical, and to be blunt, it's actually downright dangerous. Let me explain why that is and what I recommend you do instead. Let me quickly review. A full backup is a backup of everything, period. It's a snapshot of whatever it is you're backing up. So if you're doing a full backup of your drive, it's a complete copy of everything on that drive. An incremental backup, on the other hand, is a backup of everything that changed since the last backup. So, for example, you do a full backup on Monday. Then on Tuesday, you do an incremental backup, which will contain only those files that changed between Monday and Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, you do an incremental backup again. This time it will contain only the changes that occurred between Tuesday and Wednesday. You get the idea. What you've done is exactly that, except you've repeated it 365 times in a row. Rather than copying everything every day, you're only backing up a smaller subset, the things that change. It is faster, and it does take less disk space overall. I do recommend that you use it. I just don't recommend that you use it for as long as you have. Here's the problem. The incremental backups all rely on all of the preceding incremental backups. If any of the incremental backups is lost or damaged somehow, then all of the incremental backups that were taken thereafter are no longer valid. Each one depends on all of them that had been taken prior. So, for example, you take a full backup on January 1. You take a year's worth of incremental backups. So you've got 364 of them. 365 is, of course, the full backup. If you lost the incremental backup that was taken on February 1st, then you'd have lost access to everything that was backed up for the rest of the year. So my recommendation is a compromise. I recommend that what you do is take a full backup once a month. Once a week's probably a little too often. Once a month is just about right. Then you do incremental backups every day. And in fact, as it turns out, that's exactly what I do. Now, if you do that for a year, that's going to take up a lot more disk space than what you have now, your one full backup and 364 incrementals. So you'll need to manage your disk space somehow. A full backup and the incrementals that follow it are what I'm going to call a backup set. I keep 2 backup sets. In other words, the current one, the full backup, and then any incremental backups that are currently being added to it for the month that I'm in, and I keep the previous month. In other words, the previous month's full backup, and then all 28 or 29 or 30 or 31 incremental backups that were part of that month. Occasionally, I'll actually squirrel away one of the monthly full backups, but that's more of an archival thing than an actual backup thing. So, things are kind of risky with your 1 year's worth of incrementals. Everything could work just fine, but to be honest, I'd really encourage you to change your approach. Hello, Leo. Tonight on Dutch TV News, there was a warning that hackers can use your webcam, although you do not actually use the camera yourself. It's recommended that the lens should be blinded by means of a sticker or something similar. What's your opinion on this? My opinion? My opinion is that this is another case of everybody getting all excited about one very specific issue. The problem here is really much, much larger and a lot less newsworthy than getting everyone excited about your webcam. It's very sensationalistic to be talking about the webcam and that people might be viewing it, but in reality, you can cover your lens if you want to, but that really, really misses the point. So, here's the problem. Your camera can only be controlled if the hackers are able to put malicious software on your computer. Malicious software then controls the camera and does whatever it wants with the resulting images. We already have a term for that software. It's called malware. And in fact, we already have tools to deal with that. It's called anti-malware software. The bottom line is that regardless of what the software is doing, controlling your webcam or whatever, it's nothing more than malware. Remember, if you get malware on your machine, be it a virus or some form of spyware or anything like that, malware can do anything. It could record your keystrokes. It could corrupt your data. It could encrypt your data. It could delete your data. It could send spam or any of 1,000 other things that you don't want to have happen. Just one of those thousands of different things that could happen could in fact be turning on your webcam. So what's much, much more important than covering your camera is to stay safe from malware in the first place. Not just webcam malware, but all malware. How do you do that? Well, it's the old litany you keep hearing over and over from people like me. Keep your system up to date. Run anti-malware tools and keep them up to date. Get behind a firewall. Use common sense. Don't open attachments or downloads that you aren't 100% sure are absolutely legitimate. You get the idea. My concern here is that whenever we focus on some random specific technique to deal with one random specific type of malware, we overlook what we should really be doing to keep all malware off of our machines. If malware is on your machine and turning on the webcam, then sure, covering the webcam will stop it from being able to see anything. But you still have malware on your machine. It could be doing way, way more than just turning on the webcam. So do what it takes to stay safe overall, and don't obsess over any single particular type of malware. If you have to obsess, obsess on them all. I recently started to work at a small company, about 15 people with no internal HR or IT department, and I was requested to use my personal email account for work because my work email account was not yet ready. Although I've only sent work-related emails on my personal account thus far, it's been 2 days, and I intend to refrain from personal correspondence on my personal account, yep, quite ironic, until I switch to the office mail, I still have some concerns about privacy. And the questioner here goes on to ask some very specific questions that I'll get to in a moment. These are actually really good questions, and I'm sorry to say that they're all completely unanswerable in a very general sense. But I do want to take them one at a time and explain just a little about why you'll be hearing me say maybe a lot. First of all, can they see the emails I send using my personal email account on the Office server? Maybe. This depends on exactly how you connect to your personal account, and even then, it's not guaranteed. For example, you could connect to your email via a website, like, say, Gmail. If that connection is HTTPS, then your work cannot, usually, see what's going on back and forth. If, on the other hand, that connection is plain HTTP without the S, then absolutely, they could monitor everything that travels across their network or their servers. The same is true if you're using an email program like Thunderbird or Outlook. The SSL connection is usually good. It's encrypting the data that's going back and forth between your computer and the remote mail server. If it's not SSL, then that connection is in plain text, and anybody in between, including this company's servers or network, can in fact see the data that's going back and forth, including your messages and even your account name and password. What about old and opened mail, both sent and received? Can they access those too? Maybe. Again, this depends on how you connect and what they can capture as a side effect of that connection. If it's web and not HTTPS, then it's possible that they could see things in your browser history or cache. If it's a program and not SSL, then it's possible that they could do things like capture your login information and log into your account and go spelunking. If you keep your mail on your work computer, well, then of course they can examine what's on your machine. If I delete any emails now, do the changes reflect on the Office server, or will they still have access to all the emails I had when I first logged in on their laptop? Again, this really depends on how you connect to your email. So my answer again has to be maybe. The Office server that you keep mentioning may not even be involved, in which case that may not matter. But they may have access to what's on your computer if it's a company computer. If you're somehow hooking into the company infrastructure to use your own email account through their server, then absolutely, they could be keeping a record of anything that server has ever seen. Also, in general, how long do emails stay on Office servers? There's absolutely no telling. This is completely up to the company and how they've configured their servers, assuming, as I said, that your personal email is even going through their servers. It could be gone in seconds. It could be kept for years. There's simply no way to know. Finally, is there a way for me to clear them off of the servers? Finally, a direct answer. No. Not with any guarantee, that is. If your mail is going through their servers, they could be doing things like backing up. They could be copying everything they've seen. There's just no way to know that when you delete something, it's really permanently gone, and that all copies that may have been made of it are also going to be removed. Typically, they're not. So to cap all of this off, I want to also point out something else. If you are using a company computer, or if you connect your computer to the company network, it is actually possible for the company network's infrastructure to intercept HTTPS and SSL and still watch all the traffic going back and forth. It's particularly possible when you're using a company computer that has been configured for you. It's quite possible to have monitoring software installed on your company machine that watches everything you do. Basically, in a company environment, all bets are off. Period. Now, is this a real problem? Well, I have to go back to maybe. It really depends on the ethics of the company itself and their IT staff. Now, I know you said that they have no IT department, but someone set up that equipment. Anything is possible, but not everything is likely. There's simply no way to know for certain. My advice, I know it's kind of too late since you're already doing this, but my advice is if you have any concerns at all, never use your personal accounts at work. When I use the Chrome tools and settings for deletion of my browsing history and emptying of the cache, does that permanently delete those items or can they be retrieved later if desired? With all the notoriety regarding legal discovery and requests for production of emails and texts, is there a way to permanently delete emails and texts from a PC so that they cannot be recovered or reconstructed by a PC expert? Well, it's a well-known fact that deleting things on your computer usually doesn't really completely delete things. So, yeah, there is definitely some risk in the scenarios that you describe. Let's look at each of them. With respect to Chrome's history and cache, and in fact this applies to pretty much any browser that you happen to use, that information is really just stored in files on your computer. Deleting files on your computer only marks the disk space as unused. It doesn't overwrite the data. So that means that, yep, it's possible that the information could be recovered. Now, I don't want to make it seem easy. You said retrieved later if desired makes it seem like you just flip a switch to get them back, and that's absolutely not the case. It actually takes data recovery software and even some knowledge of exactly what those files are, what they contain, how they're constructed, for those files to actually be of any use. But theoretically, yes, as long as the free area hasn't been overwritten by other files, it is possible that with some luck and the right tools, the information in those files could be recovered. When it comes to emails, the same applies, only there's an additional layer of complexity. It also depends a lot on exactly what email program you're using, which in your case you haven't mentioned. Webmail, for example, means only the stuff we just talked about with respect to web browsers. There's no separate email storage on your PC when you're using webmail. Most email programs, on the other hand, actually store the email in some kind of a database on your computer. What happens when you delete mail depends then on exactly how that particular database software works. Outlook's PST, for example, actually behaves a lot like files on a disk. Emails aren't actually overwritten, they're only marked as deleted. Other email programs actually do use files on a disk more directly, and once again, the files are deleted, but to Windows, of course, that means they're only marked as deleted and not actually overwritten. Other email programs, well, they may do other things. When it comes to deleted files, including things like browser caches and perhaps even history, what's required is what's called a secure delete or a free space wipe. Now, I actually have a few articles on those topics already, but I'm going to point you at the free space wiper in the free utility CCleaner as one such program. Delete a file, wipe the free space, and the file is effectively gone for good. If you're worried about NSA levels of data recovery on the hard drive, you may have to overwrite the free space more than once, and free space wipers, like CCleaners, usually have an option to overwrite the data multiple times. When it comes to email, on the other hand, there's really no general rule. Outlook's PST, for example, can be compacted to remove all that unused space that was previously occupied by mail that you deleted. You want to run a free space wiper after having done the compaction to remove the fragments of the PST file that may have been left behind. Again, other programs, there's no general answer. It really depends on exactly how the program stores its data and what it does when you delete something. My old emails have disappeared from my hotmail/outlook.com account. I've logged into the account on a weekly basis, so I know that isn't the issue. I searched old emails, and they're just gone. Anything past 2013 emails are gone, which I need to have. What can be done? When I found out, I panicked and searched links and saw a link without reading carefully about Hotmail help. It turned out that it was not Hotmail, but a company called company redacted, they took over my computer remotely before I realized that they were not directly associated with Microsoft. Are they legit? Did they do further damage? Keeping anything critically important in only a free email account like Hotmail is, unfortunately, a recipe for disaster. I want to go over how you might have been better prepared for this. I'll touch on what you might do to get your email back, but to be honest, I'm not very hopeful. And I'll talk about that service that you let access your machine. Over the years, I've seen many important documents and email get lost in free email services. Sometimes it's the service's fault, sometimes it's the user's fault, but they all share one characteristic. They were lost. Forever. Free email services have little, if any, customer support or recourse to help you out. The key here is that the stuff that you consider important was stored in exactly one and only one place: a free email account. The way you could have prepared for this is actually very simple. Back up. There are several ways to back up an online email account, and had you done any one of them, this would not be the disaster it's very likely to turn out to be. So, if you walk away with only one lesson from this, please let it be back up. Now, getting your email back is a little bit harder. First, I'm going to point you at an article I have called How Do I Contact Customer Service for Outlook.com. There are several options there that it talks about, but ultimately, there are no people to talk to, no emails to send. There is a website that you can go to that has a lot of frequent scenarios. There is an item there called Restore Deleted Email Messages. Now, all that really is just looking in the deleted folder to make sure that they're not there. I do, of course, recommend you do that. But at the bottom of that page, they also give you a link to a contact form. It's possible that maybe someone will get back to you with assistance on the issue. But, like I said, you can tell I'm not very hopeful. Another option is for help in the support forums, also linked to from the customer service article I mentioned before. Sometimes messages can be recovered, and I honestly wish you a lot of luck. But clearly, from my tone so far, you can tell that I'm not particularly hopeful. Now, about that company you contacted. It does sound, to begin with, that you mistook an advertisement somewhere for something more legitimate, like Microsoft. I'm not familiar with the company you mentioned, so I can't say that they did any damage. I would definitely keep an eye on your machine for suspicious activities. And I would make sure that your anti-malware tools are running, are up to date, and that they themselves have up-to-date databases of malware information. Leo, earlier you gave me good advice about changing from XP to Vista due to the fact that support will end on the 8th of April in 2014. I have several questions before I do this. And what I'm going to do here is take those questions one at a time. But I also want to point out that they actually reflect a very common misconception when it comes to backups. Many people want their backups to help them migrate to a new machine or a new operating system. That's not what backups are for. Backups are to save your data in case something happens to your machine. You restore your machine to a backup taken of that machine if something like a hard disk dies or malware renders the machine toast. Using a backup taken on one machine to restore to another, especially when you're also trying to migrate to a different operating system at the same time, well, that's just not what backups are for. They can help, and we'll see how in a minute, but it's not what they're intended for. Will Carbonite do the same thing as Mercury and Reflect with respect to restoring my files and folders after I make the change, or does it lack certain features? It's kind of a little bit of an apples and oranges comparison here. Carbonite is mostly a data file only backup, and of course a backup online. Its primary job is to back up your data files, and not much else. It can be configured to back up more, I believe, but because it does so over your internet connection, A full backup, a complete backup of your entire system, and a restore of a complete system can take, well, days or weeks, or in a couple of cases I've heard of, months to complete. Macrium, on the other hand, is an image backup program. It makes backup images of your entire hard disk, typically storing them on an external hard disk or some other media. Both can absolutely be used to restore your data files. Will either system restore all of my settings, including Outlook? Again, if you're restoring a backup image to the same machine that it was made on, then Macrium will restore everything, including Outlook settings. And Windows, you'll be restoring the same version of Windows that you started with on that machine. Otherwise, the answer is no. When you move to a new operating system, you'll be installing Outlook, for example, from scratch and reconfiguring all your settings. Does changing my operating system affect the network? Mine is the primary computer with Comcast, and my wife's is secondary using a Wi-Fi router from my computer. No, the news is good here. Networking, what you have set up, should work just fine regardless of the operating system you're migrating to. If I use Macrium Reflect and I download to an external hard drive, how do I choose not to copy my XP OS and only files, folders, and other software? In other words, everything other than the operating system. Again, not really what a backup is for. There's really no way to say in the backup construct, restore everything except. You can't restore just applications or installed applications to a new operating system. You can't say restore only my data. We'll get to data in a minute, but there's no simple way to say just restore only my data because, well, there's really no definition of what just your data means. After you've installed Windows on the new machine, and after you've installed your applications on the new machine, what you'll do, or what you can do, is use Macrium Reflect to mount the image backup so that it appears as if it were another drive on your new system. Then you can copy whatever files you choose to from that backup image to the new system. What I like about using image backups for this is, since by definition they contain every file on the hard disk of the original system, you don't have to worry that you forgot something, that you forgot to back up some important file. If you find that you need something later, anytime later, you can just go back to that image backup and grab the file. Ultimately, the right way to move to a new machine or a new operating system isn't really centered around using backups at all. You install Windows from scratch, although it might be pre-installed on your machine. You install your applications from scratch, and again, depending on how you got your machine, some of them may be pre-installed for you, and then you copy over your data. Now, in that last step, sure, as I just explained, your image backup might be a convenient source to get the data to be copied over. But that's about the extent that you can really use a backup for migrating to new machines or to new operating systems. Moving to a new machine or a new OS is actually a very complex process for the computer itself. A lot can change. Now, while there are utilities like PC Mover, for example, and others that are designed to help automate migration of installed applications from one machine to another, I'm personally still of the opinion that installing from scratch and copying your data manually will give you the most reliable and the most stable results. And there's another half dozen. I do the Ask Leo Answercast every week, so if you have a question about your computer, the internet, technology, head on out to AskLeo.com and search for your answer or ask your question. You might hear it answered here on a future Answercast. I also put out a newsletter every week. The Ask Leo newsletter includes answers and fixes and safety tips, opinions, and even the occasional answers to just why things are the way they are. Please back up. You've heard me mention it now a couple of times in today's podcast. I plug this every week because it's so critically important. Nothing can save you from almost any disaster like a proper and recent backup. All of my answers are based on my own personal experience and should be used entirely at your own risk. I just don't know you, or your abilities, or the specifics of your machine, and those kinds of details can make a huge, huge difference. The Ask Leo Answercast is a production of Ask Leo and is copyright 2014. Thanks for listening. I'm Leo Notenboom, and I'll be back soon with another Ask Leo Answercast.